It's crazy. We can finally see when the media asked the Minnesota Vikings why he was chose as the last teammate you'd want to date your sister. I mean, this guy was just going crazy. He was like so blatant, phone right in his face. He didn't care.
We're back with Football Forecast Offseason Edition. He's Kaynen Buckshot. I'm Anthony Balester. We got a lot to get into, Kaynen. Definitely a lot of interesting storylines. You had Stefon Diggs, who's doing God knows what on that yacht. We got to talk about that. We also got to mention Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw finally made a statement in regards to the interest that the Steelers have in Aaron Rodgers. We also are going to be breaking down some NFL teams, including the AFC North and their offseason review and what they did in the draft and what they did in free agency. So definitely make sure to stay tuned. We got plenty much more. Definitely make sure to be following us on all social media at TFB Forecast ETV. Also be making sure to subscribe and check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. We're very close to 1,000 subscribers, so definitely make sure to hit that button and help us get there. If you like football, if you like basketball, whatever sport you like, we definitely got it, so definitely make sure to stay tuned. Also, make sure to check out our ETB Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com for all your other shows and exclusive content. And listen to us however you listen to your podcast, whether if you listen to them on the go with your AirPods or you watch them on your television. And also, the show was presented by Playback, and we'll have more about that later in the show. But how was your Memorial Day weekend, Kaynen?
Yeah, it was awesome, Anthony. Got some sun, tried to fish a little bit. How about yours?
Yeah, can't go wrong with that, especially since we both live on the East Coast. We don't get too much sun, and so we can't go out fishing that often throughout the year. So, yeah, it was a great Memorial Day weekend for me as well. I actually got to check out Canton, Ohio, which is the mecca of football. It's the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it was a great weekend to be there. It was their barbecue bash. They were introducing the new class of 2025. Obviously, we didn't get the Buster or anything or the memorials, but they got to put up some game-worn jerseys and kind of set the stage for what's going to happen in August. But what was crazy, Kaynen, is when I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, there was a special guest, and the special guest was Dave Robinson, a Super Bowl champion from the 1960s Packers, who was probably part of arguably the most talented, greatest team in NFL history. He actually three-peated. He won the NFL championship before the Super Bowl started, and then he won the first two Super Bowls with the Packers. So it was awesome hearing his stories, playing for Vince Lombardi, and also hearing his stories about playing in the Ice Bowl. So it was tremendous to be, in the same room as a Hall of Famer, a guy who was one of the greatest players to ever play the game, and to hear his stories going up against Jim Brown was definitely phenomenal. But we have to move on, Keenan, because it's no longer Memorial Day weekend, and we got some stories that we have to get into. We got to start off with the Stefon Diggs yacht video. Now, this was absolutely insane, Keenan. I know this has been going pretty viral amongst Twitter and the rest of social media. And, the video is pretty crazy, Keenan. Before I get my thoughts, what are your thoughts on what Stefon Diggs is doing?
Yeah, it's crazy. We can finally see when the media asked the Minnesota Vikings why he was chose as the last teammate you'd want to date your sister. I mean, this guy was just going crazy. He was like so blatant, phone right in his face. He didn't care. But all jokes aside, that's a really tough look for Stefon Diggs. He's joining a new team this season. That's not really the impression you want to make, especially for the Patriots. They run tight ship there. And especially for Diggs, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of pressure on him, but I think he definitely had something to prove this season. And that was before all this happened. So who even knows what's going to happen with him, considering the actions the league or the team's going to take against him for that coming out. So that's really tough. I know that's a bummer for a lot of Patriots fans. I know you were hyped on seeing what him and Drake May could do. So that's just crazy. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, I definitely still think him and Drake May could have a successful season, but it goes to show you that off the field and personality-wise, Stefon Diggs hasn't changed. And this is why, he has been a part of so many different teams and why he can't seem to find a culture that he fits. Now, I know at Houston, he seemed to be a good fit there, but ultimately, he wants to go to the AFC East and he wants to, prove something and prove that, he was a part of the large part of the success of Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen went out and won an MVP without him, so he proved his side. So now it's on Stefon Diggs to prove that he's a great player, with or without Josh Allen. And now if he can end up taking Drake May and another young quarterback who's unproven, and if he becomes a star with Stefon Diggs as number one, then that would kind of be, his way of proving to Josh Allen that, with other young quarterbacks, he can help them progress as well. But like you said, Kaynen, it's not a good look. He's I'm not sure if he's dating or what the relationship is, but I guess he's supposedly in relations with Cardi B. It seems like he's trying to become more of a rapper than he is a football player. And then when he's hanging out with all these women on the yacht, he's trying to rizz them up and be cool. And then he pulls out a bag. And, God knows what's in that bag. We can speculate what that is, but, obviously a lot of people are going to say it's something that's not so good. And more likely than not, it probably wasn't. So who knows what Stefon Diggs was doing on that yacht. I'm not sure where Cardi B was on the time. I'm pretty sure it was her friend, so maybe she was the one filming it, or she was somewhere around. But now that Stefon Diggs is in the Cardi B crowd and on yachts, passing around bags with unknown substances, it's not a good look. And for a head coach like Mike Vrabel, who's like a total locker room guy and no nonsense, he's not going to tolerate this. And that's why he made this statement, stressing the importance of making good decisions on the field and off the field. Now, like I said, I don't think Diggs is going to get any suspension or repercussions from this, but it's definitely a bad look. And I wonder what this is going to determine, his long-term stability at this franchise. Because if he could continue to be an off-the-field issue, I'm not sure if Mike Vrabel is going to put up with it for much longer. So we shall see, but it's definitely not a good look for Stefon Diggs. A guy who, like you said, was voted the guy you least like to want to date your sister, and I guess I see why. But speaking of other players who maybe had cases off the field, that's Aaron Rodgers. Now, Terry Bradshaw released a statement about the whole Pittsburgh Steelers interest in Aaron Rodgers and this saga that seems to be never ending, Kaynen. We still don't know what Aaron Rodgers is ultimately going to decide. But Terry Bradshaw went out and said that the interest for the Steelers to be interested in Aaron Rodgers is an absolute joke. He's old school. He's always been a team guy and a team player, where Aaron Rodgers comes off as arrogant and kind of a me player. So I know that definitely rubs Terry Bradshaw the wrong way. And that's probably why he doesn't want the Steelers, who are this historic franchise, to have someone like that be the leader of their team. Now, I know this team has had divas at wide receiver, but they typically don't have divas at quarterback. Ben Roethlisberger had his off-field issues, but on the field, he was a great leader and was all about the team. So I understand where Terry Bradshaw is coming from, but I do think Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback they desperately need. And I think he's the one player out there they can finally get him past the first round of the playoffs. But what are your thoughts on this, Kaynen?
Yeah, like you said, I do think they need Rodgers, and I think I've said that before. Like he would be an awesome fit there. And a lot of people I've seen in the comments they're calling Bradshaw kind of crazy or like too harsh, but as blunt as he was, I get where he's coming from because the season's coming up. They still don't know who's gonna play quarterback. He's playing back and forth, and at the end of the day, he's really not a long-term solution. Rodgers is 41, I think, 41 years old, and you sign this big contract for 1 year, and then what? Even if you win a Super Bowl, he doesn't have a lot left in the tank with that Achilles injury either. So it's kind of hard because he did look good last season, but I could kind of see the Steelers, who have been like extremely consistent. They've been like a really decent team for a long time, a lot of history with them. I can see them like picking the young guys like Will Howard and sort of developing him over choosing Rodgers as the quarterback.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Kid, and I'm glad you brought up that point. That's probably another reason why Bradshaw said this, because like you said, the signing of Rodgers is not really helping you in the future. It's only really helping you for the now, pretty much for 2025, if you're lucky, 2026. But past that point, you don't really have an option. And ever since Ben Roethlisberger has been gone, this is a team that's kind of flip-flopped, from quarterback to quarterback, and they haven't been able to find that long-term successor. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this ultimately plays out. But yeah, I can understand why Bradshaw wouldn't want him. And Bradshaw doesn't want a guy who is not fully committed. He doesn't want a guy who's half in, half out. That's why he basically said, Rodgers could just stay off doing his, psychedelic trips or retreats and talking to the gods, that as he says. So I understand where he's coming from, but I guess we agree on this, Kaynen, that the Steelers, with Mike Tomlin, who probably doesn't want to be there much longer. I mean, he's been there for a long time. He's probably trying to maybe get one last hurrah. So maybe he, at his point of his career, also with where T.J. Watt is and some of these other players, Cam Hayward, this is a team that probably does want to win now and is not so worried about the future. And like I said before, maybe one last playoff run with Mike Tomlin. So if that's the case, then I guess Aaron Rodgers makes the most sense. The Football Forecast is presented by Playback. Watching sports is fun, but it's more fun with others. We spend way too much time watching it alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, from repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Now back to the show. But speaking of the AFC North, we are at the point of the offseason where we are going to start breaking down these teams. We have, about 9 to 10 weeks or so before we get to the Hall of Fame game and start the preseason. So we obviously want to go individually and go team by team and say exactly what we thought they did each offseason. So this week we're going to start off with the AFC North, and we're going to start off with the best team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Baltimore Ravens didn't do a lot in free agency in terms of getting veterans. They did go out. They did get a Wouzier, who helps at their cornerback position. He replaces Brandon Stevens. And they added to their wide receiver depth, getting DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I know Zay Flowers is a true number one receiver, but he does get hurt. And Bateman's got his inconsistencies as well. So, again, Hopkins will go along with those three. I think that's a pretty good, decent signing. They obviously re-signed Derrick Henry to a much-deserved deal. And this is a team with paying Henry and Lamar Jackson and other players. They don't have a lot of money to spend, so they're not going to be huge players in free agency. So they're going to have to depend on the draft. And honestly, Kaynen, they had one of, if not the best drafts, particularly in the first couple of rounds. This was a team who stole Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks is a top 10 player, but because he plays the safety position and maybe he didn't have the greatest of years his junior year and played much better his first 2 years, he dropped a little bit. And the Ravens absolutely stole him. Now you're going to pair him up with Kyle Hamilton. It's probably the best young safety duo in the National Football League. This guy is so versatile. He's physical. He can cover. He can do everything you want in a safety. So getting him and then getting Mike Green, who was supposed to be a top 15 pick as a pass rusher, who had some off-field issues and character issues, but the Ravens are, do a good, exceptional job with those guys and are able to get guys who have off-field issues and get them, to kind of fix their ways and become team guys. So to get two guys who can be top 10, top 15 picks for your first 2 picks on a team that doesn't have a whole lot of holes and a whole lot of spots to make a team, to get 2 guys who, as rookies, probably will make impacts. Malachi Starks will probably start, and Mike Green is going to probably come off the bench as a rotational piece, but eventually, as the years go on, become probably their cornerstone pass rusher. So not many teams got 2, probably A-plus picks like that. Then they got Emory Jones to add to their offensive line. They also signed John Jenkins to add to their defensive line. So I really like what the Ravens did here, and I think it allowed them to contend for Super Bowls and still put themselves in a position to win the AFC North again. But what are your thoughts, Ken, on what the Ravens did?
Yeah, Anthony, I thought Malachi Starks, that was just one of the biggest, if not the biggest steal of the draft, especially pairing him with such a unique guy like Kyle Hamilton. I think that's going to be tremendous for his development. That was just a really good move by the Ravens. In other news, I think this might have came out today. I forget. There was reports that a lot of like the stars and veteran guys of the Ravens showed up to the voluntary OTAs today, and I like Lamar, D-Hop, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry, like people who don't need to be there. It was voluntary. They showed up, so I think that just shows what type of time the Ravens are going to be on this season. I think they're going to come out motivated. They made a good movement with Hopkins. He's a really good addition to the receiving core. We know they could run the ball, so it's really awesome to see them try to expand their game and improve in other areas. He isn't really the D-Hop we used to know, but he didn't do terrible last season. And at the OTAs, he was clocked as one of the fastest players at the camp, I think. So that was pretty cool to see. Another thing that happened this offseason, it's not really a move or a draft pick, whatever, but Odafe Oweh, he had a huge year last season with 10 sacks, and he apparently put on 15 pounds of muscle. That's just huge for the linebacker position, especially at the NFL level. As a pass rusher, when you see like the size of these O-line, like you need to be big to get by these guys. On the other end, it could be kind of hinderful to his game, might hurt his game because will it slow him down? Will it make him like miss open field tackles? So there's a lot of things to go there, but I mean, I think that was a really good move by him, and the Ravens are looking sharp.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing too. Was the release of Justin Tucker. Obviously, Justin Tucker and the off-field allegations was a huge storyline this offseason, and they went out and drafted Tyler Loop. And we thought, if the Ravens weren't that worried about an off-field issue, that they will let these guys compete. Well, they decided to cut Justin Tucker before any OTAs and before any training camp to not even allow him to compete. So it just goes to show you, Kaynen, where we're at culturally and where we're at, with these allegations and what's being said out there publicly, that the Ravens just couldn't warrant having Justin Tucker on the roster anymore. And then you added the fact that he did have his struggles last season, which you typically don't see that with Justin Tucker. He's usually money. It makes sense of why it's time to move on. The guy's 34, 35 years old. And with the allegations, I guess it makes complete sense for him to move on. And then like what you said, Kaynen, with this team, with all these players being bought in, showing up to OTAs, doing all the extra workouts that you don't necessarily have to show up and do, but they're all doing it anyways, even the veterans, it goes to show you where this team's mindset is and how determined they are to win the Super Bowl. And I think them, along with maybe a couple other teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Detroit Lions, maybe even the Washington Commanders to a lesser degree, these are teams that don't have many holes. And it's just whether they're going to get it done or not at the end of the year. We've seen, Lamar Jackson have his playoff struggles, but I think he kind of put that behind him last season. He played pretty well for the most part in the postseason. It was just a couple of drops and a couple of mistakes by other players that let them down. So now if you can figure out a way to get Lamar Jackson playing well and the team around them playing well all at the same time, this may be the year that the Baltimore Ravens can get over the hump. And if there is ever a year for them to do it, it's got to be this year. But speaking of another team who has gotten to a Super Bowl but lost in that Super Bowl and has gotten very close but kind of had a setback and missed the playoffs the last 2 years, the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Cincinnati Bengals had a really important and also interesting offseason. They obviously went out and re-signed Jamar Chase and they re-signed T. Higgins, giving those guys very, very huge contracts, making Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback and T. Higgins one of the higher paid receivers in football. And now you're wondering how they're going to be able to afford all these guys. And I'm wondering the same thing. Now, obviously, that means if they're going to pay all these guys, they're going to have to be perfect in the draft. So obviously they didn't really bring in any other big-time free agents on top of that. They did bring in defensive tackle T.J. Slayton to add that depth. But draft-wise, they had some questionable picks as well. They obviously had the draft defense. We know that. Their offense is going to be fine with the money that they're paying out and the talent that they have on it. But it's the defense that's going to be the difference of whether the Bengals make the playoffs and can even get close to a Super Bowl. And they went out and drafted Shamar Stewart, who has all the talent in the world. He's got all the measurables, but he didn't have a lot of production. And he's a guy who comes with a lot of risk and a lot of reward. And like I said before, the Bengals, who can't afford to miss and can't afford to really take much risk with these draft picks, kind of makes you question why would they go with the guy who has such a high floor. If this guy busts in any which way, it's going to set this franchise back. They also had some other draft defensive picks that I liked. Demetrius Knight, who's a very athletic do-it-all linebacker. I know they got two other linebackers who are getting up there in age. This could be an eventual starter replacement for him. So I love to pick a Demetrius Knight, and I love to pick a Barrett Carter, another linebacker. So I think this sets the Bengals up with the linebacker position being great now with depth, and then being set up in the future with these young guys who can replace some of the older guys they have, and they can save money out of that position as well. But yeah, the Shamar Stewart pick is definitely questionable, and now he's not even practicing because he hasn't been able to agree as to his contract. Now I know rookie contracts for the most part are set. They got the guaranteed money, but it's when that guaranteed money is paid in the language of the contract. So, and some other rookies who haven't signed are still practicing without signing. For some reason, Shamar Stewart isn't. And it goes to add you the question, you got a guy who didn't have production, who's a tremendous athlete. So you got to question why his production wasn't there. And now that he's not playing because he's not signed, you got to question his attitude and overall motivation. But it's going to be interesting offseason for them, and the Bengals have to hit on these guys for them to even sniff the playoffs. Joe Burrow and those receivers, as great as they are, can only do so much. And when they're making this type of money, you have no choice but to build through the draft. But what are your thoughts, Kenny, on the Bengals offseason?
Yeah, I thought it was great news that they're able to keep Chase and Higgins together. That was obviously that must took a lot of work to make that happen, and I think that's gonna help them out. Same as they did last year. They were really scary last season on offense, but the big question was, what are they gonna do for defense? And they did make some moves, but it's kind of unclear if it's gonna be enough. In order for them to turn themselves around, they're going to have to rely on the young guys you mentioned, like Stewart and Knight. And I think they got another guy, Carter. They're going to need them to step up and kind of take the reins. Even though they did sign some older guys, Burks and Slayton, that linebacker and defensive tackle. It's really going to rely on the young guys, and like you said, it's hit or miss. There's a lot of risk, and that's really a team that can't afford that.
Yeah, 100%, Kaynen. And then one thing I do got to mention is what the hell is going to happen with their best defensive player, their one good guy, Trey Hendrickson. Now, when them paying Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and already paying Burrow, they really can't afford Trey Hendrickson. Now, there's rumors saying that they've offered him a fair deal. But obviously it wasn't a fair deal because Henderson doesn't seem like the guy that's going to demand top dollar to be overpaid. He seems like a team guy, and if he can make it work, he will. But the guy went out and was arguably one of, if not the best defensive players in all of football. The guy put this team on his back. I think he led the league or was up there in sacks, and the team as a whole didn't have many sacks. So he's being doubled and triple blocked in every play, but yet he's getting sacks at a level to where we're seeing Myles Garrett and T.J. Watt. So this guy's up there with the best of them. Like I said, he's one of the top 3 pass rushers in football right now. He's the only good part they have on their defense, but they can't really afford him. And I don't think they gave him a fair deal like they said. And ultimately, Trey Hendrickson said he's not going to play under the current contract that he's on. He wants a new deal. So if they're forced in a position where they have to trade him, they're going to be set up for a long season, because if this was a defense that was one of the worst in the league, and now you lose one of the best players in football, and you got a rookie who still hasn't even practiced yet, and Shamar Stewart, who could potentially be this guy's replacement, I'm not sure how this defense is going to be able to compete. And when you're playing in the division, yeah, you got the Browns who aren't that good, but the Steelers are always going to come to play every week, and the Baltimore Ravens aren't going anywhere. So the Bengals definitely got a lot of question marks, and their defense is going to have to figure out a way to step up. And they got a new defensive coordinator, so we shall see what he could do. But speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, we got to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason was pretty interesting, particularly at the quarterback position. There was rumors that they were interested in Shedeur Sanders, but ultimately that didn't come to fruition. Now, there's still talks about Aaron Rodgers, but we don't know yet. But so far, their draft I really like. They went out and got Derek Harmon, who's one of the best defensive tackles. You could pair him up alongside Cam Hayward and maybe eventually be the future face of that D-line after Cam Hayward retires. Derek Harmon was the guy who absolutely took over college football and was basically unblockable at the defensive tackle position. He really helped organize defense, and I think that's a tremendous pick. You got Caleb Johnson, who's going to come in to replace Najee Harris. He's a big physical back who kind of has a lot of similarities to Najee Harris. He kind of put Iowa on his back, who didn't have really good quarterbacks or receivers. So he goes to a Pittsburgh team who doesn't have a great quarterback right now. So he's already used to that. So I think he's a tremendous pick. They drafted Will Howard as maybe a potential developmental young quarterback, and they drafted Jack Sawyer to add to that pass rush. So I absolutely like that. And then when you look at the other positions they did, they traded George Pickens, who was needed for a contract, but does have his off-field issues. And because they went out and signed Metcalf, who has a similar playing type, but is probably just a better receiver at this point and a slightly better locker room guy, didn't really make sense to have both those guys on the team. So after bringing in Metcalf and giving him $30 million a year, they did trade away George Pickens. Now, I would have loved to see both those guys on the team. Now, having just Metcalf, you're kind of in a similar scenario as last year where you have Pickens, the number one receiver, but you don't have much help to take pressure off him. So now Metcalf is going to have to take so much pressure and be double and triple teamed. And then you look at, they did bring in Mason Rudolph. So now if you don't get Aaron Rodgers, I guess you have Rudolph, but he's not the answer. So this is a team that desperately needs Aaron Rodgers. And I think with Aaron Rodgers, this can be a second-round playoff team. But what are your thoughts, Ken, on what the Steelers did?
Yeah, I think it was such a roller coaster of emotions for the Steelers this offseason. I know it was for myself. I was kind of looking forward to seeing that big three of Metcalf, Rodgers, and Pickens there. But as of right now, it's only looking like Metcalf's playing there. And as far as what they did in the offseason with the QB situation, as I said earlier, Rodgers isn't a long-term solution, but I think he is a need because I think that would be a great guy for Will Howard to play under and learn from. Because as odd as he is, and he might not be like the most warm guy, Rodgers is an outstanding football player. And I think a guy like Will Howard, who's 6'4", 240, he came in his senior year from KSU, balled out for Ohio State, and just like fit right in their system and took them all the way to the Natty. I think you can't go wrong with that. I think he could develop really good under Rodgers. And like you said, Caleb Johnson, I think that was a really good pick with Najee Harris leaving. And I really like the Harmon pick as well.
Yeah, this is a team that definitely wanted to try to help out their offense as much as they can, while also continuing to dominate on defense. I like the pick of Darius Slay. I know he is older for a cornerback position, but I still think he can contribute to go along with Joey Porter Jr. The Steelers are definitely going to still be great defensively, and if they get Rodgers, well, then they have a good shot at being the second best team in their division. But a team that probably most likely will finish last year in the division, and that's pretty common, the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns had a tremendous offseason, but I guess a team that bad could only go up from here. The team went out, they drafted Mason Graham after trading with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They could have had Travis Hunter, but instead they got Mason Graham. They picked up a number one next year. Now, I would have loved to see Travis Hunter come on this team. He could have helped this team out of two different positions. But getting Mason Graham, who could potentially be an all-pro defensive tackle, while getting an extra number one pick next year and what might be a better quarterback class, is always a smart move. They also went on and got Quinshon Judkins, one of the most explosive running backs in college football, to replace Nick Chubb. They also got Dylan Sampson to help with that running back depth as well. So you got two great young rookie running backs. They also went out and got Carson Schwarzenegger, who was one of the top linebackers in college football. The guy could rush the passer. He could coverage. He could stop the run. He could do it all. So I love that pick for the Cleveland Browns as well. Harold Fanning Jr. could be a tremendous tight end too with David Njoku. I think he's got tremendous potential, and he's a great pass catcher. But, man, we got to talk about what this team did the offseason at quarterback. This team brought in two quarterbacks with Flacco and Kenny Pickett, and then they went out and drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Now, this team was really, really high on Dylan Gabriel. They said if he was a few inches taller, they think he would have been potentially a first-round draft pick. They love his accuracy. They love his leadership. And then they went on and drafted Shedeur Sanders. So, man, I mean, I guess this team, who doesn't have a quarterback with Deshaun Watson issues and his torn Achilles, this team is just going to throw a bunch of darts on the board, and hopefully they hit on one of them. But what are your thoughts, Ken, on what this team did during the offseason?
Yeah, like you said, I really like the running back pickups with Judkins and Sampson. That's something like there wasn't really too many standout running backs besides like Genty, but those are two guys who balled out and they definitely deserved a roster spot. And it's crazy that the Browns got them both. I really like the Mason Graham pickup as well, or the pick, I should say. Like you said, possibly Pro Bowl level. He was very dominant. And at the end of the day, I'm going to say it again. I think that's going to be awesome to take away attention from their best player, Myles Garrett. I think if you have someone on the inside that can attract more attention and maybe stop them from double teaming, I think that could be more use than him getting like 10 sacks a game. So that's a really good pick by them. And like you said, the QB situation, I think I don't know if I'd say they're in shambles, but I think they're definitely a little like confused because like they brought in 4 guys just this offseason. But I think Shedeur is going to come out as QB1. Maybe not by the end of the season, but maybe the start of next season. I think they got a good pick in him so late too. Not just for his football skill, but I think that's like a brand thing. It brings attention to the team. And when you're the Browns, like football's really not the best thing going for you, so you might as well bring some kind of attention.
Yeah, and it seems like the Browns are always drafting the the high key quarterbacks, whether if it's Johnny Manziel or Shedeur Sanders. But yeah, the way I see the quarterback position figuring out, I agree with you, Ken. I think Shedeur Sanders probably will end up being the better quarterback. Maybe not at the beginning of the season, but definitely more so as we get later into the season. I know it's a limited sample size, but so far in OTAs, he's been the guy who's been performing the best. They posted what the stats were, and he was 7 for 9 for 3 touchdowns in practice, which was by far the best out of all the other guys. I know he's probably going against the third string, so that makes it a little easier, but him and Gabriel are probably pretty much going up against the same competition. I think what's going to happen is they're going to let Flacco or Pickett become the starter. I think whoever loses that, they're probably going to cut because they're not going to want to cut one of the young guys. So they'll let the 2 veterans battle it out. The loser gets cut or traded. The winner stays the starter. They keep the 2 young guys to continue to battle it out for the backup. And then I think mid-season, when their team's not going too well and the season's over, you're not going to the playoffs, I think they're going to give both these guys a shot. Maybe Dylan Gabriel gets the first couple games, and if he doesn't do too well, we're going to see Shedeur. And ultimately, Shedeur at some point this season is going to get an audition for the starting role in 2026. And depending on how good he does, will determine what the Browns do with their 2026 draft picks and so on and so forth. But it's definitely one of the most interesting storylines getting to see. And ultimately, the Browns are probably going to be one of the best teams to watch in preseason because you're going to want to see each and every one of their quarterbacks and how they perform. And these guys are going to be probably compared to all season. So I definitely can't wait to see how it ends up turning out. But that's going to do it for this episode. Definitely making sure that you follow us on all social media at TFB Forecast ETB. Making sure to watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. We're very close to 1,000 subscribers, so make sure you help us get it there. Also, make sure to check out our Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com for all your other content like MMA, basketball, whatever you like, we got it. Listen to us however you listen to podcasts, where you listen to us on the go or where you listen to us at your homes. And also, the show is presented by Playback, so definitely make sure to stay tuned. And this has been another great show with Kaynen, Buckshot, and Anthony Balester, and we'll catch you guys next week.